It is Friday, August 15th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Battlefield episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The monthly August games are still live on PSN, so make sure you claim those. And also this coming Tuesday on the 19th, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium August lineup going live as well, which for PS Plus Extra, it's looking very good. We have Mortal Kombat 1, also Marvel Spider-Man and Spider-Man Remastered, so both the base PS4 and the native PS5 remastered version, which if you recall, Sony did take those games out a little bit before Marvel Spider-Man 2, and now they're going back in, so definitely annoying when they do that. We know why they do it, but they're taking out their own games to then put them back in months or years later. So there you go, they're back in. Easily the standout title, though, is Sword of the Sea. That is a new day one launch title going right into PS Plus Extra. That's the new game from Giant Squid. We also have Earth Defense Force 6. Those games are very fun, if not a little bit mindless. And then Unicorn Overlord, Atelier Rise of 3, Indica, Harold Halibut, and Coral Island. All pretty good, diverse games there. Going into PS Plus Premium, we have the other RE games on PS1, so RE2 and RE3 Nemesis, which, if you remember, we've had Director's Cut on PSN for quite a long time now at this point, but that will also be a good indicator of what might be a big disappointment coming up for these two games, because if you recall, Capcom games initially during the 2022 relaunch with PS Plus, we saw those games were paywalled behind Premium. After a year, you could then pay for them a la carte, and I believe the licenses were grandfathered from PS3 as well, if applicable. But there was that, and then also these games do not have trophies. Capcom has been pretty consistent in not paying for that additional service, which is from implicit conversion. So that's kind of something they offer is we'll go back to some of these games, give them trophies. Sometimes they'll do it after the fact when they ship these games, so that's not, that's possible still down the road, but based on RE1, that might also be the case for 2 and 3, so I think it would just be a fair warning here that when these games go live, they will probably be paywalled, or there's a possibility of that, and they might not have trophies. Anyway, going into our first news story, the PlayStation Store on PS3 is back online. It was down for about 4-something days, actually, so by the time we covered it on Friday for LTPS last week, it was down for about 2 days, and then it was down all of Friday and most of Saturday, I believe. So it was back up around Saturday night or going into Sunday morning, rather. So really depends on a regional basis, but it was like about 4 days when the store finally got put back up, which, mind you, it was never down per se, just that it was always under maintenance. I guess that's a little caveat there. They're not spitting out an error code. They just told you straight up it's under maintenance, and the PS3 store is not a high priority. But it has certainly reignited that conversation again of how long will we have the store? And between that and the Vita store, I mean, my pessimistic sort of prediction was like, oh, this might be the year. But again, the maintenance thing is not that, because Sony would allow people some additional time, and they would do it like they tried to do it in 2021, which is a blog post, a little PSA, here's a date, here's when it's over, and that's how they would do it again if they're going to do it. But I expect that would happen again fairly soon, sometime this year, maybe next year. I don't know. I don't want them to go down, but they're just not a high priority. So I don't know. It's something that people are still heavily talking about and considering. But, for now, we do still have the store. It's back online. Moving on to Ghost of Yotei, we are fast approaching the October 2nd release, which means we are now getting in that window of the marketing cycle really starting to ramp up, and because of that we had some new gameplay clips come out this past week. First up was the use of the one weapon, the Kusarigama. So Atsu is just sort of like running through the environment and just absolutely slaughtering enemies. A very sort of controlled gameplay clip, just makes it look very cool, flashy, kinetic and fun, the kind of gameplay that you would expect from the, previously Tsushima, now Yōtei. And then a few days later we had another much more brief clip, and that one showed off a combat encounter with the Yōtei, which is more of a spear weapon, so you can see how the distance can be used to keep you away from the enemies as you're trying to get into those combat sequences. All looks good. It's definitely one of those things, though, where I'm already seeing it. Well, I saw it even prior to the state of play. You're seeing the same thing here. It circles back to that conversation we had, if you remember, about these major PlayStation sequels and how there's definitely a sort of air surrounding them. as far as them being disappointing, or maybe people are not nearly as excited for these sequels anymore. You know, you think back to the 2018 Spider-Man or God of War, or the first time we had Zero Dawn in 2017. A lot of these big major properties that have been established, and you know, they had this sort of either a reboot or they're a new IP, but they all felt very new and different, and now the novelty has worn off with their sequels. And so even though they might be really good, technically sound, beautiful, very fun games that I think arguably fire off on a lot of cylinders and are revolutionary, not necessarily evolutionary, but they're still very good games, and yet there is this conversation of, well, they're just not really doing it for me like they did the first time I played these games, right? And I feel like Yōtei is definitely going to find itself in that same position, especially off the back of something like AC Shadows, where there's been a lot of talk about that game as well. You know, just coming off that game, now I'm not really feeling like playing Yōtei at this point. So it'll be very interesting seeing how the game resonates with the wider audience when it comes out in October. Next up, we have a somewhat surprising collab for Helldivers 2 probably on the way, where Sony put out a new trailer for Helldivers 2 on their YouTube channel, and they also provided the same trailer to Xbox as well, so it's on their channel and also PlayStation, but it's more notable to be on PlayStation because during this trailer, towards the end of it, there is a slight tease where you see a drop pod land, and then the Halo 3 ODST theme is briefly played over the footage. So very clearly that's teasing a possible collab with the, you would have the orbital drop shock troopers be like an outfit in the game, very similar and analogous to what Sony did with Killzone and Helldivers 2 as well, right? You could play as the Hellghast in Helldivers 2. And so it's on the PlayStation channel, the theme is there, the tease is there, so that's probably what's going on for the upcoming Xbox launch, which is really cool to see. I mean, it would be fair to say a lot of people did not think Helldivers 2 would even ship on Xbox to begin with, so to see a Xbox-themed, you know, sort of tie-in collab and that content also being available in the PlayStation 5 version is not really unheard of at this point, right? So it's pretty neat to see, and I think for a lot of people that was very surprising towards the end of that trailer to have that very brief audio snippet pop in, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, no way, they're really doing a collab right off rip. Moving on to Hideo Kojima and Physint, the new game that Sony signed with Hideo Kojima not too long ago, which this game is still very far away, of course, but just how far away is it? Well, now we have a progress update, and, well, it turns out there's only one man even working on it, and it's Hideo himself. So, recently speaking with IndieWire and being asked what he's working on at the moment, Kojima said, and I quote here, "Well, I'm checking the data of Death Stranding 2 players all over the world. What kind of weapons they're using, the routes they're taking, all this data. And I also see these small bugs here and there, so I'm deciding where to fix and what to fix. I also am starting to work with the team on OD because that's a new project, and also doing Physint all by myself because that's at the conceptual stage. So I'm doing that. And also I have all these interviews every day and also promotional photo shootings, things like that, so I don't feel like I finished the title, to be frank." So there you go. I mean, we all knew this game was like 2030, somewhere around there. It was obviously very far away. If you even try to somehow draw a parallel to, you know, the 2015 announcement with Andrew House when they were establishing Kojima Productions and they signed on Death Stranding back then, 5 years later the game comes out. I'm not sure if you can look at that and go, oh, okay, so 5 years for this game too. Not really how that works, just that, hey, at least we know in the here and now. What's the progress on this game? Well, there's really no progress. It's the very early concept stage, and there's nobody even in the room outside of Kojima himself. Moving on to a very interesting update from last week where we talked about how Genshin Impact on PlayStation 4 is being delisted and shut down. Well, it turns out there's more of that coming, or at least what we're hearing from this opinion piece on gamesindustry.biz from Rob Fahey, where they do talk about PlayStation's current strategy and their live service output, but they also note during their opinion piece that many publishers right now are eyeing up a timeline on dropping PS4 support for their online and service-based games. They mention the technical concerns as one reason, obviously, but the tipping point is that it's also PS5's install base. It's now mature enough to where a lot of publishers are considering finally dropping the PS4 versions. Now that news happened, and then days later we got the confirmation of PUBG shutting down the PS4 version. So that one is official. Support for PS4 will end November 13th, 2025, and they'll be moving over to current gen. So in this case, on PlayStation, that will be PS5. So on PS5, you will get improved visuals and more stable frame rates, which over on the official site they did outline the performance targets. So base PS5 is 1440p, 60 FPS, and PS5 Pro is a dynamic 4K, 60 FPS as well. So there you go. Add it next to Genshin Impact, which I still think is too soon-ish. I mean, if they end them in 2027, I would think, okay, that sounds about right. But I don't know, there's certain games where I think they could arguably probably go for much longer. But it's the same thing I said last week too. I get how easy it is to point at PlayStation 4 and think, oh my god, I can't wait for the system to be finally cut off from game development entirely so it stops hampering things on PlayStation 5, which is fair language to use, obviously. I think that does, maybe it's more targeted towards AAA single-player games. The only thing as far as like a new release goes that ships on PS4 nowadays is very modest-looking 2D games. But even those might not make sense for the publisher and the studio based on licensing costs and the PS4 dev kit. And even if it's, again, very fast to ship on PS4 and 5 at the same time, that alone might not be worth it because new releases sell just abysmal on PlayStation 4. But it's the long-term established games already on PS4 with a monetized player base where I think, I'm kind of surprised that can't go another year or two. This to me still seems a bit too soon. But I digress because it is happening, and now it might be a bloodbath for the remaining live service games on PlayStation 4 as we go into the later half of this year. And really, it seems like 2026, a lot of the big names might indeed be cutting off PlayStation 4. And that does still at least bode well for the PS5 versions and what the studios will be able to do and accomplish as they, yes, get rid of that low common denominator. Moving on to some third-party news, beginning with Baby Steps coming out very soon, September 8th. This game, if you remember, has shown up during various state of plays for the past year or two, and now we have 10 more minutes of gameplay as well, which is still basically what the game is, the obtuse controls of trying to control this man through this random environment, this open nature. It's like an open world game basically, and you're trying to find different things and advance the bizarre over-the-top plot line, but it still looks so goofy. It's right up my alley, so yeah, we got 10 more minutes. I think after a minute or two, you sort of get the idea of what this game is trying to do, but, you know, at least for me, it definitely takes me back to the 2013, 2015-ish range of games where, you know, early PS4 life cycle and a lot of the stuff showing up on Steam, the games that lean into obtuse controls for the sake of the humor, so they're very fun to play with somebody else or watch somebody else play, so things like Surgeon Simulator, I Am Bread, Octodad, things like that. So I don't know, it definitely makes me think of those games, and they're a lot of fun. So this one I'm looking forward to for sure. Next up, we have yet another seemingly out of nowhere big AAA action game announced out of Southeast Asia. This one is Woochi the Wayfarer, announced for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series S and X. This game is from Lore Vault Studios, published by Nexon. They did drop a cinematic teaser trailer, so you're not quite seeing gameplay, but you can get a basic idea of what they're going for because the game is based on the Korean folklore, Jun Woochi. So they're a sorcerer that uses magic, so that'll give you a rough breakdown of exactly what kind of gameplay this might end up being, but it is being described as a blockbuster action game, so very similar to the other ones we've seen out of Southeast Asia so far, but they've said that, and also that it will feature a soundtrack from the composer of Parasite as well, so that'll be neat. But yeah, add it to the list. That was like a joking comment on the trailer upload for this game, in that we have, Wu Chang, Wukong, Woochi, a handful of other games, but that's the thing. I feel like when Wukong got initially revealed, a lot of money really flowed into Southeast Asia in that market for a lot of those studios that, you know, historically we're doing a lot of PC and mobile games, gacha games, you know, those type of experiences, but now there's been some heavy interest in the single-player segment for AAA action budget games, which is cool. It's great to see a lot more of these things end up happening because there's a lot of thriving talent at these studios in these marketplaces, and now you've got the funding and you're seeing these games finally come out, but or at least revealed. But I'm just so curious how much more is left. It's like out of nowhere you get this trailer dropped and it's like, oh my god, this thing looks absolutely incredible, even if it is a cinematic trailer. But it does grab a lot of attention very quickly for what is something that was seemingly, again, out of nowhere. And you have to wonder how many more times are we going to have this happen, and how much longer until the novelty wears off if it hasn't already worn off so far. Anyway, moving on to the Hellblade franchise. Hellblade 2 Senua's Saga is now out on PlayStation 5, which, if you remember that game, well, the first one was timed exclusive on PS4, so now it's back after being under Microsoft's ownership, which is, ironic, obviously, but it's out. And also, Hellblade 1 had its native PS5 version come out as well, which was supposed to have a free upgrade. I think that's only for digital owners of the game, because I tried with a PS4 disc, and it did not have that standard upgrade path of where it shows on the home screen. You can download the digital PS5 version, and that's a specific executable on the console where you need a PS4 disc to then launch it, right? We had a lot of those games initially when this console cycle started. We actually haven't had one of those in a while because now so many games are just straight up PS5 only at this point, right? So that upgrade path is not available. I'm not sure if that was intended or not, but for the time being, you cannot upgrade your PS4 disc, but there is that, and also there's a digital bundle on PSN as well, so you can get both games, which the first one was still very enjoyable. It's a very sensory experience, so I recommend playing that game with headphones. It was still definitely something I would recommend, although it's not everyone's cup of tea. And it does seem like the second game wasn't nearly as good, which is disappointing, so I'm not sure when I would ever get around to the second game. But either way, they're now both out on PlayStation 5, and discs are still on the way for at least the second game as well, so you might want to wait for that too. Moving on to Resident Evil Requiem, which should not be all too surprising here, but as we saw from Summer Game Fest, Jeff Keighley has confirmed that they will have the exclusive new look at this game this coming Tuesday on the 19th for Gamescom Opening Night Live, which that on its own is news because the show is coming up very soon. Now, at least for PlayStation, they're not a confirmed partner in the sense that we're expecting anything big or major. I mean, PlayStation obviously has skipped Gamescom as far as exhibiting at the event the past 6-something years, but Sony does like Jeff Keighley live streams. It's just that even for Opening Night Live, they do skip those as well. So there's really no guarantee that they'll really announce anything major outside of, like, I don't know, Marvel Tokon showing up again and they can start doing character reveals and things like that. But, we are also very close to September, and PlayStation does like holding State of Plays in September. So that's something to be mindful of as well as we look at Gamescom Opening Night Live and then the following month. So we might not be too far away anyway from PlayStation doing some more talking for their own properties and their third-party partners as well. But for Gamescom, at least, that is coming up very soon this Tuesday. So RE Requiem, Silent Hill F is confirmed, Ninja Gaiden 4, Little Nightmares 3, of course, Call of Duty Black Ops 7 if you're into the yearly Call of Duty game. So it will be, another 2-hour something long live stream. So there will definitely be a lot of things that will be shown off. So that is always very exciting stuff. I'll, of course, be watching it. Probably record reactions in case anything crazy happens, and maybe we'll do a separate upload for that or something. But at least for Resident Evil, there is also Dusk Golem on Twitter airing out some potential story details, a little bit of a leaking going on there. We're not going to get into all that because that's going to be a whole other thing, but they've been very privy to certain horror IP, and definitely with this one. So typically a lot of things they do air out does end up being real. So if you want to hear more about RE Requiem right now, then you can definitely check out some of their posts on Twitter. But otherwise, the game will get a new look this coming Tuesday. Now, another not-so-surprising news item is Metal Gear Solid Delta's Fox Hunt mode is not going to be available at launch. So Konami did confirm that, yes, the mode is going to come after, actually in the fall, so not too far away because Delta launches the end of this month, and we're right near autumn anyway, so it will not be available day one. They did also confirm no crossplay, so between PS5, Xbox, and PC, every platform will play on its own, which that in itself is surprising news, if only because that's very against the grain of what has been a fairly standardized feature at this point. And it was only, I say only, but it was actually like 5+ years ago that crossplay was not as prevalent as it is nowadays. And there's always a conversation to be had about how maybe it should be turned off by default, at least for console versus PC. But in this case, it's every platform. There's no crossplay. Only PS5 players, Xbox, PC by themselves, which is also a very Konami move, if I could just say that. It's one of those things where it's like, yeah, of course, the mode's coming after. No crossplay, sure. They just... I don't know. It's a very Konami coded decision, so I can't say I'm at all surprised by this being a thing. But at least they'll be able to launch the single player component. People get to enjoy it, and then Fox Hunt mode will come down the road, and hopefully Konami will not kill it after like a year and a half of it, just being a standard arena style thing. Next up, Crimson Desert, the very ambitious open-world RPG that's been in development for a very long time, has been delayed again. So this time it's being moved out of this year into Q1 2026. So recently, Pearl Abyss confirmed the news during their Q2 2025 financial earnings call. So it's been moved out. It sounds like this is when they actually will ship the game, but this too has had a lot of eyes on it over the years, and maybe it'll finally come out. It does look very ambitious. I think that's the most accurate way to describe the game, and there's a lot of footage out there of it, and there's been a lot of optimism surrounding it, so hopefully it does come out on time, and it turns out to be not nearly as janky as it might appear to be as well. It's ambitious, but at the same time, you don't ever really get a feel for these games until you're playing them, and there is a little bit of jank you can pick up in the footage. Next up, will Grand Theft Auto 6 come out on time? That is the question everybody and their grandmother wants to know. And so recently, speaking with CNBC, the Take-Two CEO, Strauss Zelnick, was asked just that. He was actually asked about his current level of conviction for the May 26th release date. And so Strauss said his level is, quote, very, very high, obviously. So that's the one little headline item there for GTA 6, is that, yeah, I have conviction that the game will launch on time. To be fair, I think that was the whole messaging surrounding that last trailer, which looked very impressive and had a firm date attached to it. The date on its own was a delay, sure, but it was a hard date that the team now has to hit. So let's see what happens. I mean, and obviously the angle here for me is like, I love the franchise dearly. It's one of my favorite single-player franchises ever. Don't really care for the online component. So no doubt I'm excited about playing the game myself like everybody else is. The other side of me is just so curious if this game will buck the trend of the console decay curve and Sony will sell a ridiculous amount of PlayStation 5s to be able to, again, buck that trend. That is also a financial report I am so curious to eventually see. Moving on to Remedy Entertainment, we also have some news from their financial report as well, based on how they're doing for a number of games they are working on, and also the performance of FBC Firebreak, which so far they are not very satisfied with how the game has done, at least on PC, because a majority of the performance and the player base is indeed from PS5 and Xbox Series S and X, with them launching on PS Plus Extra and Game Pass. But a big update is planned for September, so they're hoping that will generate some more traffic to the game, which in this environment is going to be very tough to do. I've not spent any time with the game. I downloaded it and just eventually never had the chance to jump into the universe, so I do hope they don't toss it away that quickly like some other publishers. But as for Remedy's other big projects, Control 2 is on track. The team is apparently focusing on the gameplay, environments, and missions, and also the studio is in full production on the remakes for Max Payne and the Fall of Max Payne as well, which full production means those games are not that far away, possibly a year or two, depending on how far along in production they are. Pre-production is definitely the time that will, or the portion of development which will take a good amount of time to get out of, and then full production, depending on the scope and size of the game, will usually be like a year and a half, 2 years, sometimes upwards of 3. Again, depends on exactly the game that we're talking about here, but for remakes, I would think that the turnaround won't be nearly as bad, so it'll be cool to have something like Max Payne be exposed to a much wider audience nowadays. Next up, we had a very interesting piece put up on GamesIndustry.biz about the current state of affairs in the games business, as far as consumer spending and consoles, PC, free-to-play games, where consumer spending is going to go, what kind of trends are going on right now. And so they also had 3 heavyweights in the business weigh in on these topics, that being Piers Harding-Rolls from Ampere Analysis, and then Matt Piscatella from Circana, and also Shawn Layden, the former chairman of Worldwide Studios, and also the former president and CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment America. And so a lot was said about game subscription, in particular from Shawn Layden, who has been very outspoken on services like Game Pass, and more notably putting games day one into a service like Game Pass. And so, again, the underlying context of this conversation is data from Circana, actually, about consumer spending. Consumers are planning on spending less on games. And unlike the 2008 financial crisis, where spending on games remained pretty steady, that might not be the case in 2025 with the prevalence of subscription and free-to-play games. So Shawn Layden said they're not a big supporter of the Netflix of gaming idea. Quote, I mean, look what happened to music. In the popular mind, music costs nothing. Music should be free. Spotify, what is that? It's $15 a month or something. But virtually no one buys music anymore. So he goes on to say that music has an adjacent market with concerts and touring and ticket sales, but games don't have that. Quote, the problem with gaming is all we have is launch. That's it. No one wants to pay money to come into the studio and watch people code. There's a lot of debates going on. Is Game Pass profitable? Is Game Pass not profitable? What does that mean? That's really not the right question to ask anyway. You can do all kinds of financial jiggery-pokery for any sort of corporate service to make it look profitable if you wanted to. You take enough costs out and say that's off the balance sheet and, oh look, it's profitable now. The real issue for me on things like Game Pass is it healthy for the developer? They're not creating value putting it in the marketplace, hoping it explodes, and profit sharing and overages and all that nice stuff. It's just, you pay me X dollars an hour, I built you a game, here, go put it on your servers. I don't think it's really inspiring for game developers. So again, Shawn's been very outspoken on this topic, so much to where when I see headlines and they don't say who's saying what's being said, I'm like, that's Shawn Layden. And every time I click into it, it is Shawn Layden. Not to say that's a bad thing. He always makes very good points, and it's the same thing every time. I mean, what's notable about the language he's using here is sort of in the face of the whole is Game Pass profitable revelation that came out from, the articles from Windows Central and this, that, and the fourth, how Microsoft actually does the balance sheet and calculate profit loss statements for Game Pass, which on a very technical sense, they do leave out game development costs for the entire thing. But that's, again, like a whole different conversation. But Shawn is kind of still calling that out to a degree, but it's still part of the larger overarching conversation of where the games business is right now. I find it very fascinating to consider the idea that, yeah, games are in a much different place nowadays from 2008 during the financial crisis, and that there's so much free-to-play and subscription, and it's beneficial for the consumer, don't get me wrong. That's always the thing that can be said about PS Plus or Game Pass. If I grew up with those things, my God, I would be eating. And generationally, if I did grow up with those services, I'm not sure I would turn into the kind of person that would value physical media as much as I do, right? Like, it definitely does change that consumer habit and mindset, but it would also probably heavily skew the kind of games I'm into, or maybe the kind of games I'm not into, because you could just be happy all day, every day, playing a Roblox or a Fortnite until the cows come home, and all your time is gone. Those black hole games suck up all this time and money out of the marketplace. And that's in face of rising AAA development costs, which, that's why you've got studios, or publishers, I should say, trying to push the needle just a little bit further to where, can we get away with an $80 price tag? Can we get away with a deluxe edition that's $100 and that raises the average spend on every time we sell these games? And they're really fighting for time, because that's the other issue. They're charging so much more, but there's not that much time in the marketplace. And also during an economic time where everyone is wanting to spend less on games because they also don't necessarily have to, because of free-to-play and subscription being available. And what does that mean for the hardworking people that make the games, that they need to eat too? They need to sell these games. So when it changes the consumer habit and the consumer mindset, while it is good for them, what does that mean for the creatives that have to try and monetize the games? what path makes the most sense as far as, do I throw it up on subscription and take a subscription deal, and that could possibly expose me to a wider audience, or it exposes me to an audience that at that point maybe doesn't like the game, and I was shafted on the initial Game Pass deal, PS Plus deal, and creatively we now have to do something that's maybe much more risk averse, or we go under, and that's not unheard of in this business either. There's just so many different angles of how this can get so ugly so fast, and that's sort of what Shawn is getting at, and that's what a lot of these gentlemen are getting at with this this opinion piece, is that games right now are in a bit of a tough spot because we had so much growth out of COVID, and then that kind of leveled off, and so there's pressure to see more growth, and it's not happening. And how could you possibly do growth with a la carte single-player AAA games when there's no time available? Not even so much a money thing, there's no time available as well. So there's that to consider. There's just a lot of headaches, I think, for like every party involved here. But at least with Shawn, he's been making the same points every time, and he was leading one of the biggest platform holders for a long time, or at least different senior positions, different departments within PlayStation. Obviously he was never the complete president and CEO, but you get my point there. So he's seen a lot, and now he gets to make these kind of comments in a very candid way, and I'm so curious what kind of PlayStation we would have if he was still around. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. You can follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was PS Vita Online in 2025, which, for those keeping score, we actually stopped doing those uploads in 2022, so it's been 3 years since going back to PS Vita and trying some online games, doing some matchmaking, and seeing who is still playing their beautiful, lovely PS Vita, so that was a good excuse to finally play those games again, and surprising results, so go check it out. Coming up, though, another upload on Tuesday. Still not sure, though, if we'll also do like a bonus Gamescom reactions thing. Depends on how crazy the announcements and things like that are, but if you do want to see that regardless, let me know, and then we'll probably do that as a bonus upload. And also we have Click R3 coming up as well, which again, those are going to be live from now on. I'm fairly certain, so if you want to know about when we're going live, that'll probably be either a Wednesday or a Thursday, so you can follow me or John on Twitter. We'll definitely let you know as we're going to be going live later that day. So it is a little bit haphazard. We do tend to record that later in the evenings, but if you're around, then it's always fun to pop into the chat and interact with us. But otherwise, that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.